Hey everybody, it's Aldo Gandhi, and I just want to let you know really quickly that our swag shop is reopened. DeepDishTees.com is where you go, and that's tees with T-E-E-S. Clever name, guys. They're the new home of our merchandise. You can get t-shirts, you can get caps, you can get coffee mugs, you can get hoodies, you can get all sorts of good stuff, and you'll help out the bar room with the purchase. So head over to DeepDishTees.com. The following program is a production of the Barroom Network. It is intended for all audiences.
Doug Buffone.
This defense sucks. This is moronic.
John Buffone.
Is Bill Lazor a good play caller, or is Matt Nagy such a bad play caller that it makes average look like Bill Walsh?
Doug was behind the microphone first. He never held back.
Very difficult to score when your offense is on the bench. When your defense is out there giving up 70, 80, 70, 64-yard drives.
Now, it's his nephew, John, and there's no holding this Buffone back either.
What the Bears are right now is what has been wrong with them for over 30 years. Just aim to be competitive and do your best to be average. And maybe we should just accept that, because the front office sure as hell did.
I don't mind you getting beat. I got my ass whipped many times. But I tell you, I took somebody down with me.
The games have been close because the defense, your offense, which you came in to revolutionize, has gotten worse as the years go by.
It's Buffone 55, the John Buffone Show.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Buffone 55, a fast-paced approach at breaking down those lovable Chicago Bears. I'm your host, John Buffone, and with me, as always, is my co-host and producer, Alyssa Barbieri. Alyssa, the Bears are out of the hunt. Can you believe it?
Oh, finally. So we don't have to keep talking about how they still have a chance to make the playoffs, only to be disappointed. So, at least there's finally a stamp. It's over. And honestly, I feel there's no better time to say bye-bye to Matt Nagy. It'd be the perfect Christmas gift.
Oh, it absolutely would for fans, the team, him probably. And also thankful that there's no more primetime games. We don't have to watch the national media taking apart this team anymore. We can just wallow in our own self-pity and watch them regionally like we should, unless it is a 3:00 game this Sunday. So I don't know how many people are actually going to get it. I hope not that many. Maybe they'll flex it out. We'll see. But despite their abysmal record, the Bears do have 3 games left, and we have a great guest tonight to help us better understand their next opponent, the Seattle Seahawks, another team that has hit some speed bumps this year. But just in case this is your first time listening or watching Buffone 55, Alyssa, give everybody a breakdown of how this show works.
So Buffone 55 has 3 segments, and we start off with our B55 segment. That's when I ask John 5 questions, and his responses must be completed within 55 seconds. The 55 is John's way of paying tribute to the great Doug Buffone, his uncle, his mentor, and a man who played 15 seasons with the Bears and wore number 55. That's then followed by learning about the Bears' upcoming opponent from someone who follows them closely. And today we are lucky to have Tim Weaver on the show. Tim covers the Seattle Seahawks for Seahawks Wire, which is part of USA Today's sports media group. We then finish things up by going into Buffone's basement, where Aldo Gandia joins us, and we have a Bears therapy session and let out our feelings. So, John, the Bears are out of the playoff hunt, but I hope you aren't out of rants. You ready?
Never out of rants. Let's get to it.
So, John, we already had an increased level of apathy heading into the Vikings game, so it would have to be really easy to zone out from time to time. Was this game any different than what we've seen the past 14 weeks? You know the drill by now. You've got 55 seconds.
Look, I said this after the game. I don't know if it was the Christmas spirit or the fact that I was sleep deprived, but the peak undisciplined and dysfunctional Bears were actually a little more fun to watch. It wasn't the exact same stale product we've been watching since September. The defense was hyper aggressive. It got pretty chippy. There were some penalties, but we watched an inexperienced and pretty scrappy secondary with mostly practice squad players rise to the occasion and play a lot better than we thought they were going to. Now, I'm not saying this was a joy to watch by any stretch of the imagination, but at least it was different. By the way, ESPN announced that this game was the most watched Monday Night Football game in Week 15 in a decade, with 15.9 million viewers across ABC, ESPN, and ESPN Deportes. That is insane to me. I was dead wrong about the ratings, and now I see why they keep trotting the Bears out in prime time despite their record.
Yeah, like you said, I mean, it wasn't enjoyable at all. And you made a good point, but it was a lot better than I expected it to be. I thought they were going to be blown out by the end of the first quarter, second half, the first half at least. And, they gave us something to watch, at least on defense, right? Akeem Hicks just looked like a monster. And I'm, really sad to see him go because this does look like it's going to be his last year. And Thomas Graham is just, just sitting on the practice squad for 14 weeks. He comes out and looks like the second best cornerback on this team.
Typical.
And, we were forced to watch Kindle Vildor for, most of the year. So, I take offense to that. But, it was a little different. I enjoyed it when the defense was on the field. But obviously when the offense came out, it was just like a classic Matt Nagy game. It kind of feels like we're playing Matt Nagy's greatest hits at this point. But, like you said, the ratings, people are like, why are the Bears in primetime so much? This game is the perfect example because no matter how bad they suck, and this is the worst they've sucked in a while, people are still going to tune into games like this. So thankfully, like you said, there are no more primetime games this year. But it was better than I expected it to be.
Yeah, we've been saying this entire time, if this team was located in Jacksonville, they'd get one Thursday night game against the Texans, and that would be it. But because they do draw the way that they do, we have to watch them on primetime 3 or 4 times a year, even if they're not very good, which this year they're really not good at all.
Yeah, I know in this game there were some penalties. It kind of felt like, the Monday night game against the Steelers. There were some questionable calls there. And one that really stands out was the personal foul on Tevin Jenkins. After a questionable hit on Justin Fields, the rookie tackle was quick to come to his quarterback's aid and started mixing it up with Vikings players. After getting punched, Jenkins fired back and was ultimately flagged. After the flag was thrown, fellow lineman Jermaine Ifedi shoved Jenkins. So, John, what is your take on everything that transpired in that moment? 55 seconds are on the clock.
You know what? Give me angry Tevin Jenkins for the next 10 to 12 years. This is what the offensive line has been missing. The aggressor, the tone setter, the guy who lets the other team know that they're not going to get away with that crap. Was the hit on Fields legal? Probably. But who was the only lineman to come to his quarterback's aid? His fellow rookie. And Fields loved it so much that he even said the Bears need more of that. This team hasn't been the type to over-physical their opponent in a long time. And Jenkins looks like he's going to be the foundation for some sort of culture change. By the way, Jermaine Ifedi, you were quicker to run over and punch your own teammate than you were to back up your quarterback. I hate that. Jenkins went over, let the Vikings know that he didn't approve. He got punched, and then he retaliated. It should have been offsetting penalties at the least, but we all saw how the officiating was. So Tevin Jenkins, for what it's worth, you got the Buffone seal of approval. Keep being that guard dog, and hopefully your teammates will follow at some point.
Tevin Jenkins has 7 penalties in 7 quarters, which isn't exactly, encouraging. But this is one penalty that I will take, right? This is something that, that we haven't seen. Justin Fields has been beaten all season long. His offensive linemen have not come to his aid at all. It was really refreshing. I got super excited when he did. I'm like, it's about freaking time, right? Like, where has this been? Jenkins has been playing for, at that point, 2-3 quarters of football, and most of these guys have been playing for the entire season and have done absolutely nothing. And Ifedi, don't even get me started on him. The fact that he had the audacity to chastise Jenkins and make him look a fool for sticking up for his quarterback when no one else has done it this season was really infuriating to me. Like you said, I'm ready. Give me this kind of Tevin Jenkins. This is the nastiness we've been missing, since Olin Kreutz and Kyle Long. And, this is someone that we need on the offensive line. And I'm ready for it. We have 3 more games. I'm ready for Jenkins to hopefully, between the whistles and not after, but, to get into it with some guys.
No, you're absolutely right. And he can be that guy for the next decade where it's just other teammates feed off of that. I think other people fed off of Kyle Long's aggressiveness, and Olin Kreutz is not take any crap kind of attitude. Even though Whitehair and James Daniels and some other guys on that line throughout the last couple years have had okay seasons, none of them have been that guy that's going to grab someone by the collar and you're like, oh my God, is he going to punch him? Now, obviously, we're not going to condone that, but you want a guy with a couple screws loose to say, Well, he might if he gets mad enough. So that Tevin Jenkins, along with Larry Borum, and maybe it's Whitehair, maybe it's Daniels, and whoever they bring into play center or whatever moves they make, hopefully they're going to feed off of that energy from Tevin Jenkins for the foreseeable future.
And I remember coming out of the draft when the Bears drafted him, one of the things that Bears fans were so excited about was that, ferocious nature and that dominance where, he's just going to give it to you, right? That was a reputation he earned in college. So, I'm excited to see that. Justin Fields was listening to his post-game comments, it was like a finally, finally someone there has my back because I've been getting my butt kicked all season.
And they're going to be attached at the hip for a long time. So that's good to see. I love seeing that.
That is good. Okay, so John, we're going to move on to the subject that just won't go away, and that's coaching. It appears that Matt Nagy is going to be the head coach this week. And I know we talk about this every week, but are the chances dwindling that Matt Nagy gets let go while the season is still going on? Your time starts now.
He just looked exhausted and defeated in his post-game presser, didn't he? It was almost like he expected this to be his last game, the way he was going all in on the refs, getting penalized for swearing at the officials and slamming the challenge flag into the ground, which, by the way, I kind of did like the emotion. But anyways, I honestly believe that if he didn't get fired after this game, it's not going to happen until January 10th now. I truly thought that they would buck the trend and fire him during the season, but with coaches missing games because of COVID now, and they might need as many available bodies on the sidelines as possible. Plus, they could potentially hang with the Seahawks this week and even maybe beat the Mike Glennon-led Giants. So I doubt they would fire him after a win. And then after the Giants game, it's week 18 anyway. So if they did fire him, I think the Bears would be giving the fans, the players, and Matt Nagy an early Christmas present. But honestly, at this point, if it didn't happen by now, I say we're going to have to wait until the middle of January.
Oh, man, doesn't that suck? But, like you said, when Matt Nagy threw that challenge flag to the ground, I'm like, that was the first time. That's the most I've liked Matt Nagy in like 2 years.
Where was that? Yeah.
I actually like that. I'm like, okay, that's good to see. But now also move
Sticking
along.
up for the players. Sticking up for the
I
players
know,
almost.
About time. Where's that been?
chewing out the refs, getting in their ear. Now, I'm sure he does that sometimes where it's not televised or whatever. It's not, they don't get it on camera, but just really, getting in their face and showing the players that, hey, he's got our back. That's what we've always wanted to see in his press conferences when, with the whole Aaron Rodgers, I own you thing. And he was kind of just like, oh, we don't want to do the him ha. And this was, actively showing, hey, I'm pissed off. I got my players back. I wish we'd see more of that. But maybe just for the next 3 weeks.
Yeah, and that really set the tone for the game, too. And I think that led to, obviously, Tevin Jenkins kind of standing up for Fields there. And like you said, thinking this is probably the best time that they could fire him now that they're officially eliminated from the playoffs. Now that it hasn't happened, I don't expect it to. And when you kind of think of where this organization is, talking about, restructuring the front office, Pace potentially being out as GM, moving Ted Phillips around. At this point, if they were to fire Nagy and, to get that 2 weeks to start interviewing head coaching candidates, at that point, who's going to be interviewing those guys? Are you going to have Pace, who might not be with the team next year? Are you going to have Ted and George doing it? I don't think we want that. So at this point, I felt like if Pace was going to be with this team next year, then we might have seen Nagy fired at this point. But this is kind of indicating that perhaps Pace might be out or at least moved to a new position within the organization. So, it would be one thing if this was the only move that needed to happen, which would be firing Nagy, but there's so much more that needs to happen.
Yeah, the wheels need to be put in motion, but if they are going to get rid of Nagy and Pace, they may just want to start both of these searches at the same time so that they're on the same page, where it's just, oh, we're going to fire Matt, and then we'll wait a couple weeks and fire Ryan. And so maybe they're just going to do a clean break with both of them the day after the last game, which January 10th now. It just seems late, but it's January 10th because there's the extra game this year. But so I think that Bears fans, we've waited this long and they're mathematically out of it. So I guess we'll wait another, 3 weeks 3 weeks.
What's another 3 weeks? I don't know if we want to give Matt Nagy an opportunity to kind of mess with us there, but looks like we really don't have a choice.
Yeah, we don't. No, it's going to happen, but probably later than what most people thought.
Yeah. And, as you had said before, the Bears are no longer in the playoff hunt. With that loss to the Vikings, they were officially eliminated from playoff contention, and we don't have to worry about that in the hunt graphic. Not that the Bears were on that for the last few weeks. But that being the case, how much playing time should the younger players be getting? And is it Matt Nagy's duty to do so, even if he isn't planning on being the coach in 2022? The clock starts when you do.
Well, after the game, I was pretty convinced that Matt Nagy would shift to this mentality. If there is even a shred of belief in his mind that he could potentially be the coach in 2022, he should refocus to 2022. The team is mathematically out of the playoffs, so if you think there's any chance you'll be the coach next year, you want to see what you have to work with. Thomas Graham should be getting significant playing time. I know he's upgraded to the active roster, but he should be playing more. Same with Jesper Horsted as soon as he gets off the COVID list. The Jimmy Graham era is over. You got to see if Jesper can be a contributor on this team. Also, Tevin Jenkins should stay right where he's at, even if Jason Peters gets healthy. Peters should be in full coach mode, helping this young guy get through the last 3 games. Tevin Jenkins is the future. Now, after I had the chance to think this over a little bit more, my cynicism kicked up, and I went back to the mantra I probably said in the show 50,000 times. Matt Nagy might not care about 2022 because he ain't going to be here in 2022.
Yeah, at this point, I think he's just kind of trying to salvage whatever kind of dignity he can. Like maybe winning a game or 2 here makes it look, maybe even if they were to win out, like what would it be, 7-10? It looks a heck of a lot better than 4-13 or whatever.
I guess.
What possibly could happen. But, like you said, at this point, this is when we want to see those younger players. And, especially you brought up Jesper Horsted, and that's something when you think about, you look at the tight ends, you look at Jimmy Graham, who's obviously not going to be part of this team moving forward, and Cole Kmet, who's been, up and down here. And Jesper Horsted has 2 touchdowns this season, and he's barely seen the playing field. He's someone that has a great chemistry of fields. He's someone who should have been playing a lot sooner, or at least get him some more reps. Like he just kind of comes in and out sometimes. And like you said, Thomas Graham, I want to see more of. Jason Peters in practice today. So, I mean, I don't think he would be good to go. But even if he was, like you said, Tevin Jenkins, especially bouncing back like he did on Monday night against the Vikings, you want to see him. I want to see him and Borum out there. I know he did a little bit against the Packers, but I want to see him now that Jenkins is kind of settled in a little bit, because you want to get a good look to see, are these your 2 tackles of the future? I mean, there's a lot of young talent to really like on this team. And, at this point, with there being no playoffs or anything, that's something that Bears fans could look forward to, I guess, if there is anything to in these final 3 games.
I guess. I mean, you really got to grasp for things. But yeah, you definitely want to see if you have your 2 tackles of the future. I want to see, I don't know how serious Jesper Horsted's situation is as far as the COVID list goes, but I want to see him out there. I want to see that guy out there, because we're done seeing Jimmy Graham. That's over. So that just needs to be something that we move past. And same with Thomas Graham, a guy who probably should have been playing a lot more throughout the season. And you wish you had some better tape on him, other than just like the last 3 games of the season, to see if this guy can actually be part of the equation next year. But once again, not really Matt Nagy's problem if he's not going to be there in 2022.
I still can't believe that Thomas Graham was on the practice squad while we were subjected to watch Kendall Vildor and Xavier Crawford for most of the season. I cannot get over that.
Typical, but yeah.
Typical. Another reason why Matt Nagy is gone after this year.
Right.
So with nothing to play for, a lame duck head coach, and no first-round pick in 2022 to track, I'm wondering if you can come up with, and I know this might be difficult, I'm wondering if you could come up with a reason why Bears fans should still be amped up for the final 3 games. No clock for this one. Good luck.
Well, this is kind of a tall order, but I'll try. Look, I saw a tweet that perfectly summed this up a few days ago. I think it might have been Matthew Berry. He said something along the lines of, there's going to be a time in March or April when you're just bored out of your mind and you wish you could just watch any NFL game. And that kind of struck me, because it's true. Every August, I get that feeling like, oh my God, I get to watch football again. It's been gone for so long. I can't believe I'm getting to watch the NFL again, because listen, in a few weeks, we are going to have to wait 8 months to watch the Chicago Bears again. This show will go from a weekly occurrence to a monthly occurrence, and we won't get to interact with everyone watching and listening to this show as much as we do right now. So as much as we criticize, complain, and feel the agony of the last 3 weeks of the football season, we'll also appreciate it when it's gone. And that's why we'll keep coming back again and again and again. And we'll be back with more Buffone 55 right after this.
Welcome back to Buffone 55. Now it's time to learn a little bit more about the Seattle Seahawks. So I'm going to kick it back over to John to bring out our guest. John, take it away.
Thank you, Alyssa. Here to help us learn more about the Seahawks is Tim Weaver. Tim covers the Seahawks for Seahawks Wire, which is part of the USA Today Sports Media Group. Tim, thanks for being on. How you doing, buddy?
Thanks for having me. I'm doing pretty well.
Excellent. We're excited to learn a lot more about the Seattle Seahawks because this is all we got right now, Tim. Honestly, we got to take it game by game because the season is absolutely over for the Chicago Bears. We just want to see if we can potentially pick up any other wins. So I do want to start off with the Seahawks in general. They currently sit at 5-9, had a game not too long ago. There are long shots to make the playoffs after a lot of people had them pegged as a basically locked-in playoff contender. A lot of things happened to this team, but what would you say is the biggest reason this team is struggling?
It's tough to pin down any one reason because there are so many more of them. But I think we got a very good example last night against the Rams. When Russell Wilson isn't playing at a very high level, like top 5 elite level, they're just not going to beat any good teams. It's not going to happen. You can pin that on a lot of different things. The pass protection for him hasn't been good for pretty much his entire career, so that's no real change. The play calling is really, really, really bad right now. Somebody made a joke that you expect kind of play calling from Matt Nagy last night. That's how bad it's gotten. I don't know if there's any other one reason that you can pin everything on, but it's been such a bizarre season. It really turned in that finger injury that Russell Wilson had in week 5. First few weeks of the season, the offense was really good. They were humming. It was creative. The layers were there. Just everything was clicking, but the defense was terrible. They're on a historic pace. They were going to give up the most yards, I think, in NFL history. Then it totally switched sides. When Wilson got hurt, the defense said they came together. Hey, we need to get our act together. We're going to play well. They all started doing that. And at the same time, the offense completely fell off a cliff. So we've never had both units working at the same time. I think the only time this season you've had really good complementary football is the win over Jacksonville on Halloween. It's been a really long, hard season of just one thing is working or one thing isn't. It's hard to pin down any one thing aside from the quarterback, but a lot definitely went into that. But just very confusing to pin down based on the way that it's gone.
You know, with that said, do you think that the Seahawks struggles this season have Pete Carroll on the hot seat, or do you see Carroll as the Seahawks head coach for the coming years?
It's really hard to see the owner firing him. This is Jody Allen, who's the sister of Paul Allen, the late owner, and we just really don't know that much about her. There was a report a few weeks ago that she's not happy about the way the season has gone. Well, of course not. Like, that's a very obvious thing to report on. We just don't know what her MO is. She did fire the Portland Trailblazers, which is another team that they own. They fired their GM recently, so we know they're willing to do it. But Pete Carroll's obviously in a different class. He's been a very successful coach for over 10 years now. This is going to be the first time they have a losing season in 10 years. They've only missed the playoffs one other time since Russell Wilson was drafted. So I think it'd be very surprising to see him get fired after one bad year. But you honestly just don't know because this is unprecedented terror. We haven't really seen them struggle at this level before. They've gone through tough phases every few weeks, but then they bring it back around. But this time it just feels different more than anything. So I'm not comfortable saying he'll definitely be there next year anymore. I'd still be pretty surprised, though. A lot of things go wrong with this team, but to fire Carroll after just one bad year, I would honestly be very surprised if that does happen.
It seems like we're in that time of the year where the trade speculations come up about Russell Wilson, and obviously Bears fans know a lot about that, given the fact that that Russell Wilson could have been a Bear at some point if someone didn't put the kibosh on the deal. But let me ask you this: is there actually a chance that Russell Wilson will be out of Seattle this year? And is there any kind of a relationship schism going on?
Well, there's been a relationship schism going on since the start. Like, there's this whole tension between Pete Carroll loves to run the ball. He talks about it in practically every single post-game press conference. We need to run the ball better. He said it again today. They only ran the ball 19 times against the Rams. He said, I want to run it 30 times. Well, why didn't you tell your offensive coordinator to do that? There's just been that tension all along. Like, usually I'm on the side of you need to let Russell Wilson cook. You let him run the no-huddle. That's when his offense functions at its best. That tension has been there all along, so it's really hard to say if if it's going to be any different this time. I do think that the trade chatter last year was all a little bit overblown. I don't believe he ever actually requested a trade. I know there's a lot of chatter around him being a trade. I think a lot of that was media creation, or like we saw recently, there was a report that Wilson would be willing to waive his trade clause to the Saints, or I don't know if it may have been the Bears and the Giants. And the Giants won just like it blew up though. And like, that makes no sense at all to me. Why would he want to go to the Giants right now? I just don't see it happening. He still has 2 years left on his contract. He's still usually a really good quarterback. There are certain things that they're doing that are very annoying right now. I would love him to fix, but they've been there all along. You want him to throw over the middle of the field more. You want him to take the quick shots instead of trying to hang on and see if something develops down the field. But that's who he is. That's what he's been doing all along. So you either at some point you have to say, this is what Russell Wilson's game is, and we accept it and we love it and we're going to take that, or you just start clean. I think on some level it does make sense to start over, trade him and see what you can get, even though they don't know what to do with the first round pick if they got one, which is why they trade them away all the time. But I'd be surprised again. I think they try to keep the core of this together. I know there's a lot of pieces that do need to be changed, but I'd still be surprised if they trade Wilson or if they fire Carroll or John Schneider at any point this offseason.
You know, and you mentioned the run game and how Pete Carroll wants to run the ball more. And, you know, against the Rams, that was one of the few things that worked for the Seahawks. What can we expect from Seattle's run game this weekend? Do you foresee this being a really run-heavy game plan, or do you think they're going to let Russell Wilson kind of open it up more?
I would expect a more run-heavy game plan, but I was expecting that last night as well, so I never know what's going to happen. This is there's no consistency. There's no you don't want to be predictable, but you don't want to have some balance. And it just more often than not now you're going way out of line with pass plays. If it's one thing, if Russell Wilson is on fire, if he's playing like he does against the 49ers, which just seem to have their number, that's fine. But he's been off so many times this year, and they just continue to try to let him throw his way back into the game. Even when the running is working, they're pretty efficient last night. I think they averaged around 4.5 yards per carry, somewhere around that. Respectable. Not a great game. Like against Houston, they just totally went off and blew him out of the water in the game. Respectable, but I honestly don't know what to expect at this point. It's very frustrating. Give me the play call. I'm going to say I'm going to run it down your throat, and then until you stop me, and then I'll try something with Wilson. But right now, I just feel a lot more comfortable just grinding Rashad Penny, see if he can do something. He's only got 3 games left on his rookie contract. They didn't pick up his 5th-year option, so he may or may not be coming back. I'd say probably not, but nobody else has more to prove these last 3 games. So I'd feel more comfortable giving him the ball as much as I can right now and try to let him lead the offense, or at least establish more of a sense of balance than we've seen recently.
Now, another guy with something to prove might be DK Metcalf. He had 8 touchdowns through week 8 and was among the top wideouts in the NFL. But since then, it hasn't been that good. What do you think has been the contributing factor to maybe his dip in production later on?
Well, he had 1 touchdown taken away by a penalty. There's nothing you can really do about that. But again, this is just this inconsistency in this offense that's just driving this fan base crazy. You have, I don't know if there's a better athlete at the position. Maybe Julio Jones when he's healthy, maybe not. They're pretty similar. I just want to get him the ball as much as I can, like throw slants, throw screens, just try to get him involved in any way you can. But if you saw the route tree from last night, it's just vertical, vertical, vertical over and over. It's the same kind of stuff. And especially when you got a guy like Jalen Ramsey on you, they're going to figure a way to shut that down. I just think they need to be more multiple with him and find different ways to get him the ball instead of still trying the same thing over and over, which it just hasn't been working for like 6 weeks now. I don't think he's scored a touchdown. And for someone that big, that tall, that fast, that athletic to not get touches like that, it's completely inexcusable. But I know you can't expect everyone to be working on the same page. It's not all going to be clicking at the same time, but this entire season has pretty much been one or the other. You have 2 basically number 1 wide receivers with Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, but it's either been Lockett is hot and Metcalf can't do anything, or Metcalf is pulling the entire team and nobody else is producing. It's one or the other. So it goes to this dysfunction overall offensively, I think is mostly on the coordinator, but there's a lot of moving parts. So I don't know. He has a right to be frustrated. He was clearly frustrated on the sideline. They talked to him. Carroll talked to him. Russell Wilson talked to him after the game. I would understand. I would be in the same position as him. I would be upset. I want the ball. If I look like that, if I have that athletic ability, I'm expecting more opportunities than I'm getting.
And the offensive line was a big contributor for the success that the Seahawks had on the ground against the Rams. So I was wondering, what's your evaluation about the Seahawks offensive line, and what areas of weakness can the Bears target?
It's really two sides to it. The right side of the line has been doing really well, at least in the run game. Jake Curhan has been starting at right tackle with Brandon Shell out. He's been great run blocking. There have been a lot of really big holes for Rashad Penny and DJ Dallas to run through. Gabe Jackson, he's a veteran. He's always been a great run blocker, and Mahler, that's been no different. He's also been their best pass protector this year. I don't know if he's given up a sack yet, which is a real it's a departure as far as the rest of the line is concerned. The center could go either way on any given night. Right now, it's Ethan Pocic. It's one way or another with him. He may have a terrible game. He may be all right. I didn't really notice him last night, which is probably a good thing. The left side of the line is really the problematic part. So it's either one or the other again. Damian Lewis is really struggling at left guard. He was great as a rookie last year at right guard. Did really well as a run blocker and pass blocker. This year, he's just totally fallen off a cliff. It's tough to be hard on him. It's easy for say go block Aaron Donald, much less easy to actually get it done. But he had a couple really bad penalties last night, and he just struggled in pass protection all season long. He's really the weak point. If I'm making my game plan about how to get to Wilson on the interior, I'm going to attack the left guard there. And Dwayne Brown, tremendous respect for what he's done in his career. It's been 14 years. He's played at a really high level for most of those years, but he's finally starting to show signs of decline now. I still think he's an above average left tackle overall, but you're starting to see inconsistency creep in and just like, oh, he's not quite as quick as he used to be, or that set wasn't quite as crisp as we're used to seeing from him. So he can be exploited if if it's a tough matchup for him. He's had some issues with Nick Bosa, as we all do occasionally when you try to block him, but he's just not quite the same level. So if I'm looking to attack that line, I'm going to go after the left side. You do what you can on the right side. None of them are really great at pass blocking, but that's been a Pete Carroll thing all along. He wants a good run blocking lineman. But if I'm going to go for pass protection, I want to attack that left side, definitely.
Let's switch sides of the ball now because Justin Fields is one of the most sacked quarterbacks in the league, and the Bears offensive line has been a big topic of discussion. So I'm wondering, is there something that Bears fans need to worry about from the Seattle pass rush, and what can they expect come Sunday?
It's another thing that's really tough to guess at because it's inconsistent. Now, they got to Matt Stafford 4 times. 3 of them were Carlos Dunlap last night. He's kind of coming alive, which is good to see. He did this down the stretch last season after they traded for him. He was a really big factor in the defense turning around and them getting their back on track there. Darrell Taylor is very good. He's a second-year defensive end. He leads them with 6 sacks. But aside from that, it's mostly been just like a one-guy show. It's Darrell Taylor or nobody else is going to get to you. Very inconsistent pass rush. They may have like a quarter or a series or 2 where they're getting consistent pressure, and then it just completely disappears for the rest of the game. I wouldn't be too worried. This is my big number 1 item on my Christmas list is upgrade the pass rush. I want them to use their would-been first-round pick, but second-round pick on just take the best edge rusher on your board. I don't care who it is. I don't care how tall he is, what his sack number, just whoever you think the best pass rusher is in their first pick. That's what I'm hoping that they do because that's a really big hole right now. The defense has it's a really bizarre, weird dynamic. I believe they're 4th in scoring defense right now and dead last in yards allowed. It's this classic bend but don't break kind of thing. You hear that over and over, but in this case, it's actually really true. They can get off the field on 3rd down. They're great in the red zone, but they just can't stop drives. And I think a big part of that is they're not getting sacks often enough. That's the drive killer, right? And they're just not getting enough of them for this defense to function the way you'd want it to.
The Bears offense hasn't been able to do much well, but the one thing that they have been able to do well is run the football. And Chicago actually has a top 10 rushing attack. So can David Montgomery expect to find success against the Seattle run defense?
I wouldn't expect it. This is actually one of the few things that they've been doing well. They got completely creamed by Derrick Henry. I believe it was week 2. They were great in the first half. They shut him down. I think he was averaging like 3 yards per carry. I'm like, we nailed him. We stopped Derrick Henry. Then the game went on. He got going as he does, and he just completely rolled over them. 3rd quarter, 4th quarter, overtime. He won that game. But since then, the run defense has been really, really good, really tight. That was something they did mostly well against the Rams. They kind of washed out the second half. but most of the game they defend the run well, and that's been the case most of the time. If you have a really great running back like Derrick Henry, obviously they're going to have troubles with that. Dalvin Cook also gave them some trouble, but they've done really well against the run for the most part. Even they did some creative stuff with Cooper Kupp as a rusher. They shut that down as well. They're really good. They're keyed in on that stuff. That's the one of the very few things that this defense has done well consistently pretty much since week 3.
Now, on the other side of that, the Seahawks are a few years removed from the Legion of Boom, so I do want to know what the secondary is like now in Seattle. Does it still have traces of that, and could the Bears, who sometimes lack explosive plays, have some opportunities to get downfield?
There's opportunities right now, but it's mostly because of injuries. Jamal Adams is done for the year with a shoulder thing. Trey Brown, rookie cornerback, looked really good for a few weeks. He's also done for the year. Then DJ Reed is on the COVID list now. So you're down to your number 3 and 4 cornerbacks. And not a lot of teams are 4 deep at cornerback. We are not one of them. Bless Austin got the start last night. He was trying to cover Odell Beckham. Did not have a lot of success. He got the lowest grade on the team for PFF. Just couldn't even hang with him. There's a great picture I found. He's about 7 yards behind Beckham, who's got the ball out. He's just running free, and Austin has no chance to catch him. I would expect that would be the guy that you want to go after. Sidney Jones is projected to be the other starter at corner. He's done pretty well. He had some awful games early on the season when he was still getting adjusted, but he's really settled in since week 5, and that was the case when the whole defense kind of shifted and got better. When they're healthy, it's a really good secondary. I really like it. Quandre Diggs is extremely underrated. He got his 5th interception last night. Best ball skills by far on the team. In fact, I think Seattle is the only team right now that doesn't have an interception for a cornerback. So they're lacking in that department. They're not going to get turnovers except for their safeties. But Quandre Diggs extremely underrated. I love him on the back end of that defense. Definitely the best they've had since Earl Thomas. And that should be number 1 priority, is giving him an extension as far as in-house stuff goes this offseason. You need to keep him in-house, because without him, kind of that back end may fall apart. But there are definitely opportunities, especially if you're going to be targeting Bless Austin or the slot. That's kind of been a problem all year. They've had 2 guys rotating there, either Marquise Blair or Hugo Amadi. Amadi, terrible time again last night. He's just having no luck no matter who he tries to cover, not tackling very well either. So there are opportunities there to take advantage of. But overall, I still think it's a pretty good unit, and they're performing above expectations, especially with everybody that they're missing right now.
So we always get a kick out of talking about special teams here. So I was wondering, Tim, if you could give us a quick profile of the Seahawks special teams. Is there a player that fans should be looking out for, whether it's a kicker, a punter, a gunner, or a returner?
Yeah, they have a great punter, Michael Dixon. He should be a Pro Bowler. They were just announced it. I don't believe that he made it, but I think he should have been. Probably the best punter in the league as far as pinning their other teams inside the 20-yard line. I believe he leads the league in that stat this year. He's got some flair to him too. He can do some Madden stuff and kind of pin you down inside the 5, put some spin on it. Really impressive stuff, and that pairs really well with some good coverage. So it's really tough to get good starting field position on this team, which is another reason why the offense is so frustrating. Overall, the special teams unit is really good. They just have the kicker has been inconsistent. Jason Myers had a great year last year. He's having issues with these shorter kicks in the 35 to 40 yard range. I don't know what it is. Just kickers, they get in their head, and then it's very hard to get it corrected in season. I expect him to bounce back next year, but right now he's just kind of struggling. But that's really the only weak link. Every other part of the special teams is good. They have a dynamic return game. They cover well. They punt well. They do pretty much everything at a high level except kicking field goals, and that's kind of a big part. So a little bit of a problem there. But overall, really good unit.
Now, if I would have asked you this question before the season, it might have seemed like a no-brainer. And now that I'm asking it to you later in the season, it may not even matter. But I am going to ask you what your prediction is for this game, because both teams clearly struggling, both kind of struggling with the same thing. But there are some stark differences there. So what is your prediction for this game on Sunday?
I have to pick the Seahawks, even though they're looking inconsistent and frustrating as hell. They've been very good against bad teams, and sorry, right now Chicago's a bad team. They crushed the Jaguars, they crushed the Texans. they played to their competition at least. They can beat very bad teams. It'll go one way or another if it's somewhere in the middle. They have no chance against quality competition this season. That's become clear. Last night didn't reinforce that, but they have done very well against bad teams. Houston, they just blew them out of the water running the ball. Rashad Penny, 137 yards and 2 touchdowns. That's more than he had pretty much the entire season previously. He just completely went off. And Jacksonville, Geno Smith looked like Drew Brees slinging it around. Looked brilliant. So bad defenses, they can run up the score on you. I know Chicago's missing a lot of people right now on the COVID list, and they don't have Khalil Mack. I think it's a pretty tough task for them. But then again, like if Russell Wilson is on his game, anything goes, anything can happen. You just don't know which Russell Wilson you're going to get. But if he's going to be competent, which he usually has been against poor competition this year, I'm going to have to pick Seahawks. I believe I picked 33-20, something relatively insulting like that for the final score, but I'm confident enough to say like they should score 30 points. They should win by multiple touchdowns, but it's hard to be too confident about anything right now the way things are going.
Nope, that makes sense. I completely understand why you did that. One bonus question before we get you out of here, though. I have to, by emergency, start Gerald Everett in my fantasy semifinals this week. Is that a bad start for me? Is he going to do anything for this team?
He might. He looked really good last night. He caught 4 passes. One of them wasn't even intended for him. The ball just kind of got tipped in the air, and he made a play on it. He was very aggressive. He had a great half. We wound up with 60 yards. They shut him down the second half, but he's looked really good occasionally. He had one terrible game where he had 3 turnovers. I don't know what happened that time. It was just one of those freakish football things. He had an awful game. But the rest of the season, he's mostly been solid. He's a good pass catcher. They know how to use him. That's one guy they know how to use, at least. They know where to put Everett, and he seems to have a pretty good rapport with Wilson. So for an emergency option, I wouldn't feel too bad about that. I had him on my team briefly earlier this year. I don't want to talk about how my fantasy season went, but he'd be okay for an emergency option.
Yeah, with the injury of TJ Hawkinson, I had to go scraping late in the season to try to find a guy to start in my semifinals, and it's between Gerald Everett and Jared Cook, and I'll probably end up going Everett just because I know how the Bears play sometimes. But that's probably who I'm going to go end up with. But hey, Tim, before we get you out of here, can you tell people how they can read your stuff and see all your work? Because leading up to this game, they probably want to get a better idea about what's going on with the Seahawks. So how can they read your stuff?
Sure thing. You can read my stuff at seahawkswire.usatoday.com. I'm not on Twitter myself, but the work account is at the Seahawks Wire as well.
Excellent stuff. Tim Weaver, thank you so much for being on Buffone 55, giving us a good idea of what the Bears are up against on Sunday. And happy holidays to you. Hope you have a great holiday season.
Thank you. You too.
All right. We'll be back with more Buffone 55 right after this.
The Barroom Network presents 2 fired-up Bears fans. They are ready to rumble on the Bear Debate.
Welcome back to Buffone 55. It's time to go down to Buffone's basement, the fun segment we do here when Alyssa and I walk down the stairs. We put on our paleontologist caps and we go dust off that old dinosaur we call Aldo Gandia. Aldo, how you doing, my friend?
I'm doing well. Great show. Tim was a great guest. I made the prediction that the Bears are not going to win a game the rest of the season. But, man, if the Bears were who we really thought they were at the beginning of the season when we were predicting, 500 record or a little better than 500, they should have won this game against Seattle. I still don't think they're going to do it. But, that's a team for the pickings right there.
Yeah, the game against the Vikings, I thought that they had a chance to win. I was actually the optimist on this show last week when I said I thought the Bears were going to win at least 2 more games. Alyssa said 1, and you said they're going to lose out, which would put them at 4-13, which is a new record as far as they had the extra game there, but that would just be horrendous. But I do want to start this out on a fun note. It is the holiday season and we're having a lot of fun here, so I want to talk to the fans and I want to ask you guys the same question, but I also want to talk to everybody in the chat room. I saw this on Twitter today, and I pay attention to the Twitter sphere every once in a while, but it said name something nice, because this is the season of kindness. Say one nice thing about each team in your division that is not the Bears. So I offer that challenge to both of you, and I'll try to do it myself, and everybody in the chat room. Say one nice thing about each team, the Lions, the Vikings, and the Packers. See if you can say one kind thing or something that you like about that team. And so I'll let you noodle that for a little bit. For me, I probably should have thought about this before I actually asked the question, because I know. The Lions, I like that they're gritty. I like Dan Campbell. I don't know if I like him as a head coach quite yet, but if I was, walking down a dark alley, I'd want Dan Campbell on my side and not walking up in front of him. So I appreciate Dan Campbell and his 15 gallons of coffee that he drinks every day, and the fact that he'll bite someone's kneecap. I can appreciate that. The Vikings, oh man, I like their flat purple helmets. Those are nice. I think that they're better than the shiny ones. And then the Packers, I like cheese. That's about as far as I'm going to get with that. I like cheddar cheese. That's about as much as I can possibly give the Packers. But that's all I got. Anybody else have anything nice to say?
For the Lions, I like their stadium. I've been to Ford Field quite a few times, and like you, John, I do like Dan Campbell. I like that fire, which we kind of saw a little bit with Matt Nagy last night. So I mean, that was nice. For the Vikings, I like Justin Jefferson, especially because he's helping me. He got me to the playoffs in fantasy football, so I really appreciate that. And for the Packers, oh Lord, I like that this could be Aaron Rodgers' last year in Green Bay.
There you go. Hey.
I'll add to that. With the Lions, you have to be eternally grateful for the fact that they have a worse ownership group than the Chicago Bears do. I mean, Martha Firestone Ford is really been pretty bad. And now they've got some new hope with the new coaching and accumulating draft picks and so forth. But don't worry, they'll screw it up. They'll continue to be the worst team in the league and put a little bit of a shadow on the fact that the Bears are one of the worst teams in the league. So with the Minnesota Vikings, they've got great training camp facilities. I was there to cover them for a couple of days, and so they made me feel very welcome. Their communications department was great. And as for the Green Bay Packers, Lambeau Field is a great place to visit a football game. Love the Packers or hate them like I do, it is still something every Bears fan should have on their bucket list to really soak up and appreciate further the rivalry between those two teams. You got to see a game at Lambeau Field if you haven't.
That's a good point, Aldo, about the Lions, because they do take the spotlight off of the Bears, because over the last 10 years, like we've said before on the show, the Bears are only averaging one more win per season than the Lions over the last decade, but it's always the Lions that get like the national criticism, and they're the butt of all the jokes. Now, the Bears are doing their best to wiggle their way into that spotlight a little bit, but it does help that the Lions are in the same division. So, and, Lambeau Field, that's a great answer as well. I think there's a lot of history there. There is the root to this rivalry. And so, understanding the enemy, so to speak. So all good answers. And I didn't even think about people I have on my fantasy team, although I think the only player I have from the NFC North that's not a Bear, it was TJ Hawkinson, and he's done for the year. So that's about as far as I go with that. But okay. If anybody else has anything they like about the other teams, go ahead and throw it in the chat room. We'll see if we can read some of them. But I do want to get into some Bears talk, as abysmal as it might be. Let's start off with the game against the Vikings and some of the calls we saw in there, namely the one we talked about in B55 with the Tevin Jenkins one, but also the Travis Gibson personal foul. I thought that at first when I saw it, watching it on TV, I said, what the hell happened? Like, why did they flag him? And then you watch the whole replay, and he did come back basically onto the field, look at a player, and then point in his face, which upon further review, it's obviously we suck. But upon further review, he deserved that. That was stupid. That was absolutely moronic what they're doing. So as much as we may praise Tevin Jenkins for what he did, that's as much as I'm not on board with what Travis Gibson did. And we saw a lot of that. There was a lot of chippiness in that game, and I liked seeing that edge from the Bears. I also have a real problem with being undisciplined, being able to do it to a point where you don't get flagged for it. So we've talked about this numerous times, whether it's, pre-snap penalties, whether offsides, or having to call timeouts before, fourth down, or calling timeouts out of a break, or whatever it is. Has this been an eternal problem for the Matt Nagy Bears as far as just being undisciplined? Although we just brought you in, so I'll ask you first.
Yeah, I think so. I think penalties are a reflection of the coaching staff. And so when you have players who are not focused at the line of scrimmage, Matt Nagy talked about it today. You've got to be locked in. You got to be focused. Well, your guys aren't. And so that is part of your responsibility to prepare them in such a way and to hold them accountable, so that and Justin Fields mentioned that Sunday, talked about what happens to Ohio State players, and they got to run laps and push-ups and so forth when they commit penalties. And Matt Nagy says, yeah, we hold our guys accountable, but there isn't any, when he's with the, there's no conviction to that. And so they're clearly a reflection of Matt Nagy's kind of, I want to be your friend more than I want to be your coach philosophy. And, and if I can just add, the Tevin Jenkins penalty bothered me when he did it, because like Alyssa mentioned, he's got 7 penalties now in 8 quarters of football. Charles Leonard was run out of town last season. He had 7 penalties, and he didn't miss a quarter last season. So while he did show some improvement in his pass blocking from his first game to his last game, you can't, when you have an offense as putrid as the Bears are, you can't give away 15-yard penalties. And again, Justin Fields was correct. You got to take care of that during the play. You settle that in a way where you're not going to get penalized, because if you're going to, retaliate to somebody's punch to the face, that's just not smart. Now, Jermaine Ifedi didn't handle it correctly either, but the bigger picture here is that he has got to control the penalties. That's an awful lot of penalties for a young man coming in, and I give him some slack because he hadn't had a training camp, because he's was really ill prepared to be playing the games. He's been rushed because of injuries and COVID and lack of depth and all this stuff. So I give him some slack, but let's hope that this is not going to be a concern with Tevin Jenkins moving forward. He did come into the NFL because of that mean streak attitude, but if that's going to demonstrate itself with stupid penalties, then we might have a problem with Tevin Jenkins.
I don't think it's a problem. I'm sorry, Alyssa. I'm just going to jump in real quick. I don't think it's a problem at all because the game meant nothing to the Bears. And so it meant nothing as far as playoffs. It meant nothing as far as what they were going to do. Their draft picks, they don't have one. So the fact that I'm not bothered of it because it showed moving forward, hey, we got a junkyard dog on the offensive line. We got a guy that will get into your face. And so I get it not doing it after the whistle and getting penalized, but he also got punched in the face first. It should have been offsetting penalties. It should have been that the ref was there. It wasn't even like nobody was around and he just snuck a punch in. There was a referee walking towards the pile when Tevin Jenkins got punched. So it should have been a penalty on both. It should have been offsetting. So the fact that he came to the aid, and Justin Fields actually noticed that. He noticed that someone came to his aid. So if you're going to pick up a 15-yarder every once in a while to show the other team, hey, this crap ain't going to fly, then I'm all for it. Set the tone. Set the idea. Now, it's not Tevin Jenkins' fault that the offense is so putrid that one 15-yarder might ruin the entire game. So I mean, I'm not going to be mad at the guy who's setting the attitude whenever your coach can't put together an offensive game plan. It's like, oh, that 15-yard penalty, we can't possibly overcome that. That's bullcrap. That because there's plenty of teams that have get those kind of penalties and they're able to overcome it. So if he's going to be the guy that's going to grab someone by the face mask or he's going to do something like that, that comes along with being the enforcer. That comes along with being that guy that eventually you're going to get flagged because it's hard to just be the bully. It's hard to be the angry guy on the line and not eventually pick up a 15-yarder here or there or a personal foul here or there. It needs cleaned up. He has some things he has to clean up. But if that's going to be his attitude moving forward, I'd rather him do that than have someone punch like Jermaine Ifedi come in and just basically punch him after that and say, what the hell are you doing? What did you do on the play? You watch the whole thing unfold, and then you just run to the rescue. What does that do? What does
would you have been okay if he would have punched Jermaine Ifedi in the face?
If he would have punched him back?
Yeah.
No,
I mean, that's what you're making it sound like.
Come on.
Not bull crap. First of all, you say these games don't matter. Every snap matters, even when you're out of the playoffs. These guys need snaps. They need to play at a high level and get muscle memory and run their plays and assignments precisely. Everything matters. This isn't the bullshit game. They just go out and pick a fight with somebody because you got hit in the face.
He didn't pick a fight.
He got penalized. Let's face it. He got the worst end of the stick, and that's not good for a team that's struggling to move the ball to get pushed back 15 yards. That's not the way I would coach my team to tell them, yeah, go ahead out there and smack that guy in the face.
You're missing the point. You're missing the point. The fact of the matter is, would you rather them win the game and still miss the playoffs because they're never going to go to the playoffs this year, or actually someone say, hey, next year we got a junkyard dog in this guy and he's going to take care of us? I don't know. You're not going to punch your teammate. Jermaine Ifedi punch. I'm not saying start a fight with anybody. I'm not. You're blowing this way out of proportion. I'm not saying start. Yeah, I'm not saying go ahead and just start a fight with somebody and just say, hey, bring out your switchblade. I'm talking about if a guy gets in your face and punches you, you push him back, and then if your teammate gets in your face, you're like, dude, what are you doing? I'm not saying that you have to be an absolute psycho and go out of control and start punching everybody like you're in the Michael Jackson Bad video. You got to actually you got to say, this guy's in my face. I'm going to push him back. You're not just going to be like, oh, he pushed me. I guess I'll walk away. Him ha. Oh, geez, he pushed me. I guess I'll walk away and be soft in front of everybody. This is a violent game.
Was there a better way to handle it, John?
No.
Justin Fields thought so and told him. You do it during the play. You do it during the play. You don't do it during that. That was a stupid move. We should all acknowledge that because it was a stupid move. You don't do that. There are ways to get back at players. Your uncle told you a million stories, I'm sure, of how he got guys back during.
Oh yeah, I'm sure Butkus would have walked away. I'm sure Butkus would have been like, okay, I'm going to walk away. He would have jacked that guy in the face.
You know that was a totally different style of football. They used to drag.
Well, then don't bring my uncle into it. That was 40 years ago.
But John Buffone did it the right way. In between the whistles is when you get back at that player, not after the play when the referee is always going to catch the second guy that throws a punch.
If you're John at somebody and your testosterone is boiling out of your face and someone just pushes you like that, I hope you have the fortitude to say, I'm going to walk away.
I usually run away.
It's just that it doesn't happen. That just doesn't happen. And I'd rather my teammate do that and say, all right, we're in a fight now. We're in a dog fight. Let's go.
I don't think anybody in Justin Fields doesn't feel that way. The coaching staff doesn't feel that way.
Justin Fields isn't a lineman, and the coaching staff doesn't know their ass from a hole in the ground.
You're making excuses there. These are guys.
What excuse? Did it cost them the game?
Well, it could have cost them a touchdown and momentum. Yes, that was a big play in the game. That was one of the turning points. That was a milestone moment in the game. So I think it was a big play. You don't want your brand new player making stupid mistakes. That's 7 penalties already. And when you're making aggressive penalties like that,
one penalty.
Well, but isn't that a concern? Alyssa, please come in here and tell me.
If it happens every game, if he punches someone every game like Mario Edwards does, if he goes Mario Edwards and gets a personal foul every game, then yeah, it's a problem. But in this isolated incident, it was not. He was trying to protect his quarterback.
I respectfully disagree.
Fair enough. I mean, I think the penalties are an issue early. Obviously, that's something you can get fixed up. But like John said, in that moment, I don't once in a while, or in this instant, it was right. I like that because you have to kind of show them, like, you're not going to let your quarterback get pushed around. But I don't, now that he's learned from that and his quarterback even pulled him aside and was like, okay, you can't do that after the play. It's a learning opportunity, right? But at the same time, that kind of shows the player that Tevin Jenkins is. He's not going to do it every game. If that happened, that would be the more concerning thing to me, because you see this in every game too, like players doing this all the time. So as long as it's not like an every game occurrence where it happens so much where it's going to cost them games, because the hope is that the Bears are going to be competitive in the future, right? So that they're going to be in these games, and games are going to matter. Wins are going to matter at that point. So, I mean, the penalties themselves are a concern this early, but I think that can be fixed. I mean, I'm kind of focusing on that he showed improvement in pass protection. And in that moment, that one penalty, protecting Fields, I'm okay with it. But if it starts happening more frequently, that's when it becomes a problem.
That's when it's a problem. But if I'm a rookie in the NFL and someone's trying to clown me by punching me, they're going to think they own me the entire game then. And I just think that you got to show a backbone early, or they're going to come at you and they're going to clown you the whole time.
Is it necessary to do it right then immediately? Is it necessary?
I don't think. Did you really have that abstract thinking that you can break down that minuscule of a second?
Yes,
in the heat of the moment.
John, I've played a lot of football in my time. And when somebody did something dirty, we would get back to the huddle and we would talk about that more than we would talk about the play. We would say, yeah, let the guy come in. And when he gets next to the quarterback, just jack him in the ribs. That's the way you play the game of football at the NFL level and at the sandlot level. That's the way you get back at somebody, not by in a scrum, you throw a punch right there in front of the referee and get penalized 15 yards and hurt a team that's already suffering an offense. There are ways to get guys back.
You make it sound like he body slammed him egregiously. He threw the exact same kind of push.
He got penalized for 15 yards. That's the subject matter here. It's not anything else. It's the penalty. It's concerning. If he's going to continue to do that and continue to have the bad techniques that have led to 6 other penalties, then it's a problem. This guy's supposed to be the future left tackle.
Are we talking about technique or attitude? I'm not, because you're talking about the 7 penalties. I'm talking about this one penalty. If you want to talk, I'm talking about this isolated penalties. Talk about the other 6 if you want, about technique and all the procedure and experience. That's fine. I'm talking about this one penalty, and you're making it sound like he does this every game, which we have no track record to prove that he does. This was an isolated incident where he did this one time. We have on tape that he did this, and it's a problem.
It's a concern.
Okay. We have different concerns at this point, but that's fine. Jenkins is one of those young players that's going to get a lot more playing time as the season goes by. More of those young players like Thomas Graham who show up and showed out. And although this is a big reason why I wanted you to weigh in on this particular one. Thomas Graham, is this a strike against Matt Nagy that this kid wasn't in there a lot earlier when we saw the secondary struggling throughout the entire year?
No, it's not. And I'll tell you why. Listen to what Thomas Graham himself said after the game and at today's press conference. He did not play at all last season. So when he showed up to camp, he had issues staying on the field because of injuries. He had a terrible camp, and he was cut. And he was questioning himself whether he could play. If we're gonna give Ryan Pace credit for some of the good things that he's done, you got to add this to the list: is that he brought the kid back after he cut him. He kept in communication with him. He showed them tape about what he should be doing and so forth. He mentored the young guy, and it wasn't until after the bye, these are Graham's words himself, that he felt comfortable to get in there and play. Where he felt, I'm starting to get this. I'm starting to feel confident and so forth. So. Clearly, they were watching this guy the first half of the season, and he was not ready to play. And Kendall Vilder, somebody that they have invested time and coaching over the last 2 seasons, he had to play out of that slump. He wasn't able to, and so then you look at making a move. So I don't think we can blame Matt Nagy or anybody else in the coaching staff to say that Graham should have been put in, weeks ago. He just wasn't ready. He wasn't ready, and that's by his own admission.
And the other guy I wanted to talk about. Go ahead, Alyssa. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, with Graham. But my question is, would we have even seen him this season if the entire starting secondary got COVID? So, at what point was he ready just this week? Was he ready a few weeks ago? Because I don't have an issue with him not starting the season on the active roster and playing right away, because Aldo, you made great points. He didn't play last year. He didn't have a good training camp. He had to practice through that. But at what point was he ready? Was it just this week where conveniently they needed to activate a whole slew of defensive backs because they had nobody? I'm wondering if we would have actually seen him at all this year if not for what happened this week.
That's a good point, because who knows if we would have saw the kid at all. And another guy I want to talk about is, I know he's a fan favorite with Aldo and also you, Alyssa, is Jesper Horsted. Now, he's not going to be able to play because he's on the COVID list, but let's just say that he's able to bounce back quickly, and hopefully, he's not feeling any symptoms and he's feeling okay. But if he's able to get off that list quickly, is it? I believe, Aldo, is the term you use, malpractice, or if he's not on the field and malpractice, if he's on the field and or he's not on the field and Jimmy Graham's still out there.
Yeah, I mean, I give Ryan Pace credit for grooming Graham, but the whole idea of Jimmy Graham still being on this roster is ludicrous. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And I'm talking about really from the beginning of the season, because you had to have faith that Cole Kmet was going to get better. And you had to have a sense that you had something going on with Jesse James and with J.P. Halstead, that those were 3 tight ends there. And so you bring in the 4th guy, Jesper Horsted. You got to see what you got there, particularly because he's played so well in preseason games. 3 touchdown receptions in his final preseason game of this season. And the Bears made all this hullabaloo with their media department, showing Ryan Pace, telling him you made the team and made the roster and so forth. But what does that mean if he's not going to be given an opportunity? The kid has been targeted 3 times on passes this season, and 2 of them are touchdown receptions. That tells you that this guy is ready to play, or at the very least, ready to be given an opportunity to sink or swim.
Listen.
Yeah, that's one of the things I had an issue with too, is that he hasn't been given the opportunities despite what he's shown. And I mean, especially for Matt Nagy, talking about how he puts stock in preseason and training camp, right? And Horsted had a great preseason, obviously that last game especially. So why hasn't he been given more opportunities, especially when one of the concerns earlier in the year was that Justin Fields didn't have any chemistry with some of these weapons out there. So that's when you should have been playing guys that he does, like more Jesse James as well, and Horsted. So I mean, I like what I've seen so far, and I didn't know that he was only targeted 3 times, Aldo, and both of those are touchdowns. That's pretty damn impressive. And I mean, at this point, I want to see more of him. Obviously, if he's able to come off the COVID list, I think he should be involved more. Do I think he will? No, because I feel like they're going to kind of shove Jimmy Graham down our throats some more. I mean, Graham's a great guy. He's been a great tight end, but at this point, he's not the future of the team. You need to see if Horsted something. You want to bring him back. See if you can get him involved. He's someone that Justin Fields clearly likes as well. So I mean, I want to see him get more opportunities because I feel like at this point he's earned them.
And I saw the question in the chat room. Do I think Cole Kmet is a bust? I hope there's not this narrative that I hate Cole Kmet because it's just not true. I think Cole Kmet has the opportunity to be a contributor on this offense. My issue has always been the high draft pick used for Cole Kmet, not Cole Kmet the player himself. When you see some of the dominant tight ends in the league and what round they went in, that's what kind of irked me a little bit. I think, and I saw this in the chat as well, if he doesn't show a lot of improvement next year, maybe you can start saying maybe he wasn't worth that second round draft pick. I want to see him in a different system, obviously, the one that can maybe utilize his talents a little bit more. His blocking has gotten better as much as it's good to see get blocking, but you probably don't take a tight end in the second round just because he's a great blocker. But I think that there's still a lot of potential there. He does look a little mechanical a little bit. Sometimes he looks like a robot. Like when he's running, it just looks like he has a suit of armor on, but he's not overly fluid with some of his motions. But I think that he does have the potential to be that safety blanket for Justin Fields for a long time. I think that year 3 would really be that year that you would want to see that start to take shape. Anybody else think that Cole Kmet's does anybody think of Cole Kmet's a bust or he has potential here?
Go ahead, Alyssa.
Yeah, I think he has potential. I want to see more because the one thing I've noticed the last 2 seasons is that it's taken a while for him to really get involved in the passing game. Like last year, it took the first half of the season, right? And then he kind of went off in the last few games. And even this year, it took a few weeks before he was really a part of that. Tight ends weren't targeted much in this offense. So, I mean, I think he has all the potential in the world. I mean, you don't take him there at that spot in the second round if you don't think so. So I just want to see it all come together. And John, like you said, I think a new system would be great, a new coach. So, I mean, I want to see year 3, what he's going to do, but obviously he's going to have to learn new offense and everything. But I mean, I still have hope for him. After year 3, if we're still having this conversation, then maybe we can,
I think, that John, you said something that piqued my interest is whether he's worthy of that second round draft pick. And that was my concern when he was drafted in the second round. Did they reach a little too high for this guy? That was a really deep draft for tight ends. I just pulled up some of the other tight ends. Adam Troutman from Dayton, he at the Senior Bowl, this guy was getting so much attention. He's been a little bit slow to develop too. All of these guys really have. Bryson Hopkins from Purdue, Hunter Bryant from Washington, Harrison Bryant from Florida Atlantic. He was a sensation down at the Senior Bowl. Albert O from Missouri, on and on. Joshua DeGuara, who's playing with the Packers now, Steven Solomon. I mean, that draft was so thick with quality tight ends, guys who had promised to play in the NFL. So when the Bears reached with that first pick of the second round, their first pick in the second round, I said, oh man, that seems to me like a little bit of a reach, and it seems to me like Pace trying to rectify the Adam Shaheen mistake. And so from that standpoint, it angers me that he was picked at that position. But in terms of his development, if he was drafted in the 3rd or 4th round, which is really where he should have been, then we wouldn't be as upset with him right now. Right. He's really playing to what he's probably going to be in the NFL, which is an average or a slightly above average tight end. So it's frustrating, of course, when he misses those easy passes, but he does lead the team. He's second in the team actually for pass receptions over 20 yards. Now I know that doesn't mean much. I know
how many is that?
Not much.
6 receptions over 20 yards.
Yeah,
20 yards 11.
Yeah. No, the way you framed it the first time was very if you're working for Bears PR, if you're his agent, that's exactly what you're gonna say.
That's right. I like the guy. He lives down the block from me.
No, I got no problem with him. Was Chase Claypool a tight end that turned into a wide receiver in that draft, or was he one of those?
No, he was the wide receiver at Notre Dame. And I remember interviewing him at the Senior Bowl, and I said, a lot of people are talking about you maybe playing tight end in the NFL. He glared at me and he said, "Who?" And I go, "Well, just people from the media and stuff. I'm a wide receiver." And boy, that nasty streak that Claypool has been showing in the NFL recently, he has that all the time, I think.
yeah, and I think he went pretty good, a good way after
Yes.
Komet did.
In
That would
that
have been
same round, yeah.
yeah, and that would have been a nice little addition. I thought the Bears. I thought that he was an athletic freak, and he really is. He is an athletic freak. And I thought he would have been a nice addition to the Bears. And I hate this because I don't want to seem like, oh my God, I hate Cole Kmet. It's just that the investment they made there. I remember I mocked them, Jeremy Chin, I think that year, the safety. I really wanted to see them get that safety position figured out. But they and much to what your point was, Aldo, it was another Band-Aid for another mistake, just like we've seen all along the Ryan Pace regime. It's whether it's you got to make up for Kevin White by going to get A-Rob, which worked out, or you have to go get Robert Quinn because you had to let Leonard Floyd go. You didn't pick up his option, or Adam Shaheen didn't work out, so you go get Jimmy Graham and draft Cole Kmet, and Mitch Trubisky wasn't working, so you go and you get Nick Foles. And so it's just, Band-Aids and Band-Aids and Band-Aids and Band-Aids, and then you never really get to address anything. You never get to really go after your needs because you always have to fix something that you screwed up. So I think that that's going to be kind of the legacy that Ryan Pace kind of leads behind here, is a guy that was pretty good in the mid rounds and found some gems, but overall construction, like going into at the beginning of the season, why did they only have like 3 or 4 active cornerbacks on the team? Was it really, they really could not get anyone that was worthy of being on that team? So there was good, and there's always that Ryan Pace argument. It's like, well, if you look at what he did here and here, but outside of like some bad free agent signings and outside some of this, I'm like, well, those are all kind of big contributing factors, though. Those are all things that make the team bad, like bad free agent pickups and misses on high draft picks. And so, like, Kevin White's not here anymore, Leonard Floyd's not here anymore, Mr. Trubisky's not here anymore. These are guys that you wanted to be here for 8, 9, 10 years. And you have Roquan Smith and Justin Fields, and who is there another first rounder of his that's still on the team? I can't think of any.
That's it.
That's it.
That's really it. It's Roquan and Justin Fields. Those are the only first rounders left from the Ryan Pace era.
Yep.
Oh wow, I'm learning that in real time. I'm like I honestly I didn't bring that up to like bolster an argument. I really didn't know. So that is telling. Now, and everyone was just like, well, we got Eddie Jackson in the 4th round. Well, that's great. And you got Tariq Cohen in the 4th round, and Darnell Mooney in the 5th round, and that's great. But there's a lot more than just hitting on the 3rd through 5th round that you got to take into account. And right. So that's why I think, and Aldo, maybe you had my ear on this a little more than I thought, as far as it was time for Ryan Pace to go, because I was kind of teetering. I was like, oh, we'll see. And now I'm fully in. They need a fresh start with a new GM, a new head coach, a director of football operations, VP of football operations. Ted Phillips needs to just be an accountant and take care of the Arlington Heights deal and just let him take care of all the cash on that side. And then hopefully some football people can run, the football team.
I do think that there is this feeling in the air. I feel like the Bears are going to make some kind of major organizational change in the next 3-4 weeks. They'll announce that they have or will make some organizational change to address these things, because I think we are at a point now where everybody recognizes that things are starting at the top, and it's even above Ryan Pace, that it's a Ted Phillips issue, a George McCaskey issue. And so I truly believe that they get it. And they're at that age now where they're saying, who the hell wants to, go to a high school football game and hear people saying fire the coach that we think about. And it's the media, it's the alumni, it's the laughing stock of when we're on national TV. It's like David Kaplan said the other day, we're a national embarrassment. And so I think what's left at this point, I don't think George McCaskey's ego is that huge that he's going to say, you know what, I'm the chairman of the board, I'm going to stay the chairman of the board forever. I think that he's going to make some decisions here that I hope that we'll all be proud of, that he's going to either step down or cede a lot of the control that he and Ted have to people who know better.
Alyssa, I was going to ask you that basically a follow-up. Do you think that primetime game where Louis Riddick was really going in on, like, there needed to be changes? He talked about Matt Nagy, he talked about Ryan Pace, but he also talked about Ted Phillips and George McCaskey. Do you think that that national spotlight on not just the GM and the head coach, but the chairman and the president might actually put a little more pressure on them.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Just like what Aldo said. I mean, it took them being an embarrassment and they are on primetime. Maybe we should be thankful that they were on so many primetime games, because it was multiple opportunities for them to be embarrassed and for everyone to start realizing that this isn't just a Matt Nagy issue or just a Ryan Pace issue. So, 0-4 on primetime, some pretty brutal performances. And you had Riddick. It kind of felt like he was kind of even auditioning for a GM role. He's like, okay, this is what's wrong with the team. This is what I would do. Right. So, it did take. I think that they have pride, right? And the fact that they are being embarrassed and they're being called out by the media and on national TV, where a record, right? What was it? 15.9 million people watched this game last night. I think that was probably, crazy. They're more concerned about what they look like than probably what the team's actually doing, right? So at this point, I think that will push for bigger changes. I'm curious to see how high up it does go. Like you mentioned, maybe McCaskey, I don't know if it's this year or whenever, but I'm curious to see exactly what changes are made, because it's not just going to be one or two.
It shows you how big of a juggernaut the NFL is that 15.9 million people would watch Bears Vikings on a Monday night. You got nothing else to do. I know why I'm watching, but you got nothing else to do. And that was after you already got your football fix, because that Cleveland Las Vegas game was on at 5. Well, at least on the East Coast. I watched the game from 5 o'clock until 8 o'clock, and if the Bears weren't playing that night, I'd be like, all right, I'll maybe put this game on before I fall asleep. But the hell are you guys doing? Why would you got nothing else to do than watch Bears Vikings on a Monday night? That is amazing to me.
Hey, I wanted to ask you guys something. And Brad Biggs' Chicago Tribune Q&A column that he does every week, somebody asked the question: is trading Robert Quinn a viable option this offseason? As soon as I read the question, I go, what? I can't believe he even chose this question. Of course not. But Big says, yeah, that it is, because the Bears might want to save his $12.8 million that he's due to be paid next season. And I'm like, well, $12.8 million is not a lot for a guy who is probably going to break Richard Dent's sack record this season. But Biggs goes on to say that, paying him and Khalil Mack when you're obviously going to start a rebuild doesn't make a lot of sense. And so he's kind of open to the idea that the Bears might trade Quinn. Now, you're not going to get much for a guy who is his age. You're not going to get a first rounder. You might get a second round. What did Von Miller get when he was moved from Denver? A second and a third rounder?
Yeah.
You might get something like that. But I just always hate when we finally acquire good players and they start playing well, we move them because of salary cap issues or because of this or that. Heck, the major thing that needs renovation here is an offense. We need an offense that can score points. If we can maintain the good parts of the defense, maybe we can win some games next season and even get Justin Fields some playoff experience in 2022 or 2023. It doesn't have to be a rebuild where we as fans have to live through 0-17 seasons. Please, no.
Oh,
we don't want to be Detroit.
No, I always try to see both sides of things. And so I understand that if a new GM comes in and a new head coach comes in and they say, we are going to tear this down to the absolute foundation and rebuild it, and we don't need an aging edge rusher, and we can maybe get a second round pick and turn that into our edge rusher for the next 10 years. I understand that reasoning. I also know that if you're going to be rebuilding, you'd like to have at least a couple veterans on there to show the new folks how things work and set a tone. And I don't think there's a better person right now than Robert Quinn, who went through the absolute doldrums last year, where they were calling it possibly the worst free agent signing in Bears history, where he was just getting dragged week by week by week by week. And then he comes in and has an absolute career year with the Chicago Bears, could potentially break a record. it just might be a guy that you want to keep on the team, not just from a production standpoint, but from a leadership standpoint. And so I personally would want to keep him, but I also understand that his trade value may never be higher. You may never get more for Robert Quinn than you do at the end of this season. So if a new regime comes in and says we can get a second round pick for Robert Quinn and get almost $13 million off the books, sign us up. We'll take that. So I'm taking the really coward approach here and saying I don't know what I would do, but I lean towards keeping him.
Yeah, I would love to keep him, but again, maybe if you do get multiple draft picks, like a second and third rounder, maybe that's too difficult. Yeah, but man, I just hate being in this position. I hate to give up on good players,
especially when you don't have a first rounder.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what makes.
Luckily, we don't have to make this decision.
Really? Well, and then the whole Leonard Floyd thing is still sticking in my crawl. We released him at a point where I was starting to feel, what? I was starting to appreciate him because of his versatility, the fact that he can guard tight ends and running backs. Yeah, he could play so much on the football field, and everyone's expectation was, if he doesn't get double-digit sacks every year, then he's a bust. Well, that's not necessarily true. And so we give up on him, and what happens? He goes to the Rams, has more sacks than both Quinn and Mack combined, gets a big fat contract. And I saw guys like Lauren Cox say, they're going to regret signing him to that contract. I don't think so. Not after what I've seen this season. There's no regrets at all. This guy is a player and was worthy of being a top 10 pick for pace, but they gave up on him too quick, and that's sad.
Yeah, it just seems like I think he's comfortable in LA, and I think he probably
glad to get out for sure.
Yeah, Aaron Donald helps a lot, but we had Akeem Hicks is quite the force. And by the way, before we get off the show,
I was literally going to bring it up. That was literally that I said before we wrap things up. I got to talk about Akeem Hicks because there's a guy that is just epitomizing the Bears for his entire tenure here. Most likely not going to be a Chicago Bear next year, and with that goes. Not just like we were talking about, not just the production, but the absolute intensity that guy plays with and the energy that his teammates can feed off of. And I've said numerous times, I would run through a brick wall for Akeem Hicks. That guy gets me so jazzed up that it's infectious. I can only imagine what it's like to play beside the guy. That being the case, I like I said, I don't think he's going to be on the team next year. It's almost a foregone conclusion that he's not going to be on the team next year. I just hope for his sake, he can hook up with a contender because that's a guy that deserves to play in big time football games. That's a guy that can make a difference in playoff games. I would love to see that guy compete for a ring before his time in the NFL is up. Anything else? I mean, you guys go ahead. What are you guys going to remember about Akeem Hicks?
Oh, like you said, that intensity. I mean, and he's someone who is just like an absolute monster. Like he looks like a bear, right? We always talked about that.
Yeah.
But he's like the nicest guy like you'll meet. Like I remember being at training camp and he'll stay and he'll sign autographs and talk to people. And he's just like a big teddy bear at times. But when he's on the football field, he's just an absolute beast. And I appreciate that. And I respect that, and that leadership that he's brought to this team. Like, I mean, like you said, John, I'd run through a wall when they would show like those huddles, like when they had him mic'd up, like whether it was like for a primetime game or whatnot. Yeah. And I'm just like, oh my gosh. I mean, I'm gonna miss him. There's no way he's coming back, which is unfortunate. And like last night when he had that first sack of Kirk Cousins, and he was just kind of like, waving to the crowd and stuff. And he said that he wanted to. People are always waving at me and chanting my name. I want to make sure the fans know how much that I appreciate them and love them. And I'm like, oh. Like Akeem's gonna make me cry. I'm gonna miss him a lot. He's just a great person, a great football player.
I'll just add, because you guys have covered everything, but I'd like to amplify just the way he talks. I listen to a lot of the Bears press conferences looking for sound bites and information and so forth. And a lot of times when the players, a player would come up there for 5, 6, 7 minutes, there wasn't a good sound bite to use in that press conference. Akeem Hicks, you could play all 7 minutes from this from his press conference. It's all fascinating. He was asked, about his feelings about Matt Nagy, and even his response, the way the question was phrased was, it doesn't look good for Matt Nagy's future here. What's it been like playing for him? What are your thoughts about Matt Nagy? And he said, I'll be happy to answer that question at the end of the season. What professionalism? What the exact perfect words to say at that moment? Maybe he's going to throw the guy under the bus. Maybe he's going to say great words, but didn't want to, write him off as being the ex-coach already. Whatever it was the perfect thing to say, and he always seems to say the perfect thing. And the way seeing him, Alyssa, you saw him down at camp. The way he interacts with the fans, signing autographs and bullshitting with people and stuff. He's just such a great guy, man. I hate that he's going to leave.
Yeah, and this is just going to be one of those winds of change where we're going to see a lot of people or a lot of guys who we're used to seeing in Bears uniforms may not be there if they're going to start making some of these wholesale changes. Guys that have been in the team for a couple years, guys we may not be able to see the Bears play without. Something's going to change because there's going to be wholesale changes in the front office and on the sidelines, and they're going to create things in their own vision. And so we're going to see how this shakes out. But we don't have to worry about that until, another 3 weeks or so. But that being said, as we wind things down here, I just want to say that I appreciate everybody who was in the chat room tonight. I appreciate anybody who's listening to the live version of the podcast version. And just so we can clarify, Aldo and I bicker like we're at a family gathering for Christmas, but it's always in good fun. I love everybody that I work with. We have a great time. So this is all in good fun, and all because we love the Chicago Bears. And quite frankly, guys, it's not that serious. We're not gonna be angry at somebody because of the game of football. There are far more serious things going on in the world. So,
and trust me, if John Buffone tells me punch that guy, Aldo, I'm going to punch him.
And if Aldo ever looks at me and says that's probably not the right thing to do, I might take it into consideration.
Might.
Well done.
I'll consider it. Yeah. That being said, make sure whenever you're on your holiday drive back to wherever you're going, holiday flight, go ahead and tune in to the Barroom Network. We got fresh stuff for you all the time, whether you're looking for Bears coverage, Bulls coverage, Blackhawks coverage, science fiction coverage, anything in the world. I think we have a show for now. It's a pretty good thing as we're getting out of 2021 here. But make sure you just hit that subscribe button. Go ahead and watch us on YouTube. Download us on all of those podcast platforms. And like I said, whether this is your first or 55th time listening to the show, we appreciate each and every one of you. And Alyssa, please plug your stuff, because I don't know how you write so many articles in a day. Like I have carpal tunnel thinking about it. I just don't know how you do it.
I power through it. Lots of caffeine. So yes, to read all of those articles, including I'm going to have a piece up about Roquan Smith getting stubbed from the Pro Bowl later tonight. Make sure you go to BearsWire.com to check out all the news about the Bears. We have front office speculation. I did post with some general manager candidates to replace Ryan Pace if that's where they choose to go. Head coaching candidates getting ready for the Seahawks game, and check out Seahawks Wire as well. Tim, we work together. He's great. He did a great job informing us about the Seahawks and making me feel not confident the Bears can win. But let me add that the best way to stay informed about all the great things happening here at the Barroom is to follow us on social media at Barroom Network. And you can find us all across social media from Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube.
That's right. And our buddy Grant Sims says, don't forget to set those reminders. So, whenever we go live, you can click in right as the show starts. You won't miss anything, and you won't miss all of this fun that we're having here. And once again, thank you so much. I hope everybody has a safe and fun holiday. Take care of you and take care of your family, take care of your friends, check in on people that you haven't talked to for a while. Sometimes it's going to be a lonely time of the year. So make sure you check in and see how everybody is doing, whether it's friends, family, or just acquaintances. Sometimes just a quick text or a call can make all the difference. So we appreciate everyone that was with us here tonight, and we look forward to talking to you next week. Enjoy the game, everybody. For Aldo Gandia and Alyssa Barbieri, I'm John Buffone. We'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.